Perfect. Good afternoon and welcome to the Cradle-to-Career Executive Director Review Committee meeting. My name is Gavin Payne and I'm the chair of this committee. Today's meeting will be run in accordance with Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act rules as required by law. Just for folks' reference, we're planning to attend sometime around 3 o'clock, if not before that. I'd like to welcome the other members of this committee who are with me today. Thank you, members Virtuelli, Lee, and Tagorda for volunteering to be on this committee. Some of you for multiple iterations. Members Virtuelli, Lee, Tagorda, and myself are participating remotely as indicated in the agenda. So before we begin, a small note to members, please ensure that your cameras remain on throughout the duration of the meeting to be in compliance with the requirements of Bagley-Keene. So the purpose of today's meeting is to provide the committee clear information about what is to come during this committee process and the review and the survey that will take place, the survey that will be completed by the governing board and the process that will follow later on from that in the fall. Before we dig into today's work, I wanted to take a look at what lies in front of us. In total, there are 7 items on the agenda. The agenda, which is posted on the C2C website, specifically notes the agenda items on which we will be accepting public comment. Today, members will be voting on 1 item, and we will be opening up a public comment on 3 items. The item that we'll be voting on is number 3. So I want to call this meeting to order and ask that Stephanie Gutierrez-Valdez please call the roll.
Thank you, Member Payne. Member Payne?
Here.
Member Virtuelli?
Here.
Member Lee?
Here.
Member Moldal? Member Tagorda?
Here.
For the record, we have 4 members present. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Let's move on to item 2, which is the overview and layout of the executive director review process, including the milestones that we'll need to be meeting for that committee. I want to introduce to all of you Ronnie Jones, who's a senior consultant from Leading Resources Incorporated. And for those of you who will remember, Leading Resources is our consultant on general board governance issues and election issues and things of that sort. And so if I can please now turn it over to Ronnie.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Payne. I appreciate that and look forward to our time together today. First, I would like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed at the C2C website. During this agenda item, we will walk through the layout of the executive director review process, including key milestones for this committee. In particular, we'll be reviewing the key components of the timeline, essential tasks, and the flow of information. Next slide. As you know, sorry, slide 5. There we go. Thank you so much. That's great. No, thank you. As you know, the governance manual states that, quote, the yearly performance review of the executive director is a critical activity of the governing board, which is intended to support the individual leading the office of Cradle-to-Career data and ensure that the data system fulfills its mission. The performance evaluation is part of an ongoing, forward-looking, and clarifying process between the board and the executive director, end quote. This presentation is intended to help you understand the process associated with this yearly performance review. Next slide. This table provides an overview of the executive director review process, timeline, and key milestones. You will see that this timeline starts with today's meeting and ends with the February 28th governing board meeting, during which the board will consider the adoption of the committee recommended performance evaluation in a closed session. We're going to go into more detail about some of these items. So next slide. The first phase of the work will begin today and helps us to prepare the survey for adoption. So you can see on this slide that today's meeting for September 12th, we'll be reviewing the current draft of the Executive Director Survey, soliciting feedback from the committee, and providing an update to the board at the November governing meeting. The next step in this phase is that at the November 15th governing board meeting, we will have an opportunity to review the recommendations of this committee and hear timelines related to when their part of the Executive Director Review Survey need to be completed. So we'll be updating everybody, the entire committee, on that timeline. Next slide. So the next phase of the work will be the survey completion and data analysis. And this will take place from mid-November, excuse me, through December. So starting on November 18th through November 27th, the Executive Director will complete a self-evaluation using the same survey form. Then beginning on November 2nd, the board survey period will open and the survey will be shared with all board members to complete. LRI will send out the survey and board members will have until Monday, December 16th to complete it. This timeline will be provided to board members and they will have 2 weeks to complete the survey. During this time, LRI, myself, I'll be available to provide support to access the survey. I will also be updating the board chair on completion rates. And then finally, by December 20th, LRI will provide a prepared survey summary and the data to send to the board chair that they will then have access to. Next slide. There's lots of things happening then between this December date and between the February board meeting. So hang with me for this final phase of work that will be the performance evaluation, preparation, review, and adoption. This phase of the work will start in December and will culminate with the February board meeting. So between December and early January, there's a period where the board chair will prepare the performance evaluation, taking into consideration all the survey results from all the members as well as from the executive director, and will create a summary. On January 16th, this committee will meet again, and you will review the draft of the performance evaluation written by the chair in a closed session. So following this review, the chair will incorporate feedback from the committee to determine the performance review that will be brought to the full board for the February governing board meeting. In January, the chair and the chair-elect will meet with the executive director to discuss the committee recommendations for the performance evaluation. And then finally, on February 28th, during the governing board meeting, the board will consider the adoption of the committee recommended performance evaluation in a closed session. So that concludes this part of my presentation, and I'd like to turn it back over to Chair Payne.
Great. Thank you, Ronnie. Clear, concise, obviously busy overview for us. I want to ask, pause here and see if there are any members of the committee that have any questions for Ronnie or myself on the process so far.
Just
Scanning.
one,
Yes, Meredith.
I think there was a typo on that last slide. You mentioned that the chair would prepare in early January, and I think it says executive director. So just might want to correct that one.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions, concerns, issues? Perfect. Let's move on. With that overview, we can move on to the next agenda item 3, discussion, public comment, and possible action on the executive director survey and survey logistics. And I want to invite Ronnie back now to walk through that agenda item 2. I'm assuming we're going to have the most amount of conversation about this in the survey going forward. This is the item, for those of you in the public, that we will be voting on at the end of the presentation. So Ronnie, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. If we could refer both the public and staff to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, that staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. During this agenda item, I'll be providing a high-level overview of the survey content, design, and logistics. And then a quick note to members, I'll be presenting some information and then I'll turn to you for input in chunks so that there's not too much to give input on at one time. And then I'll continue to the next part of my presentation. So I'll turn that over to Chair Payne when we get to those sections. So next slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Ronnie. Good. Perfect.
Yeah. And then I also just say that we do have some questions that we'll keep up on a slide for you to refer to. So you don't have to just remember everything verbally. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Yeah. So at the August 2024 board meeting, the board established an executive director review committee. That's all of you. And this included the approval of a charter and a designation of 5 board members to be part of this committee. The charter sets forth the purpose, duration, scope of work and activities of the committee, and the charter gives the committee the authority during the first committee meeting to provide recommendations or modifications to the executive director review survey. So that's what our job is today during this item. And the charter was linked in the staff report for anybody who's interested in viewing that. Next slide. So this year's proposed survey can be found in attachment A, and this is the survey that was approved by the board last year and was an evolution of the previous year's survey. So last year, the committee made edits to the survey, building on what worked and making improvements in other areas. So first, I'll be reviewing the organization and structure of the survey for you. Next slide. So on this slide, you can see that the survey will be organized into 9 topics that are listed with the bullet points there, and then 23 questions embedded under these 9 topics. So I'm just going to pause for a second, let you scan those 9 topics that are listed on this slide. And then as you can see, the survey also includes 3 open-ended questions, and those open-ended questions are focused on the achievement, strengths, and opportunities available for the executive director. So next slide. So the first part of the survey that the members are going to complete includes a Likert scale of responses and incorporates some survey design best practices. So just a couple of points for your reference about what some of these best practices are that the committee worked on previously was to ensure that the questions were shortened to make it clear about exactly what's being evaluated. There's not a lot of extra phrasing or additional words that might make it confusing in some cases. Additionally, the questions address a single topic. So all of the questions avoid combining any of those 9 areas that we talked about. For example, staff relations, engagement, and systems management would never be combined into one question. They would always be addressed in separate questions. The questions are also categorized as we just looked at those 9 topics previously. And that's you know, our brains work better when things are organized into chunks. And so that just helps us understand what the topics are that are being covered and how the questions are organized. The development of the survey really has some consistent terms. So for example, throughout the survey, I'm trying to stick to words like effective or effectively instead of cycling through different terms that might need to be redefined at different points in the survey. And that, again, just helps for consistency's sake. And then finally, the survey really avoids terms like inspire and excite for respondents to interpret. And so those might be more interpreted more as feelings as opposed to indicators of performance. And so we've really tried to focus the survey on indicators of performance without having to interpret whether something is effective or inspiring, because those 2 things may not go together. So for your purposes, in attachment A, we've highlighted in gray the topics of focus for that question. And it could be helpful to keep that in mind as we think about refinements coming into the next section of this presentation. All right, next slide. All right, so there are 3 items we want to call to your attention for your discussion. And so the first item, if we could bring that up on the slide, thank you, are about general expectations. And so if you go click one more time. All right, So this question, should we add a line after the question citing what might be considered? So let me give you a little context for that. The survey is written slightly more generally than previous surveys maybe have been written. And that's because it covers all of the general expectations for the executive director. And then each respondent can really respond to the specifics of that more general question as they're responding on the Likert scale or in the open-ended questions. Creating the survey in this way allows us to keep the survey consistent year to year, right? So there's value in understanding how the executive director is going to be evaluated each year consistently, as opposed to changing the questions every year, which doesn't give you all a lot of data. Right. So doing this allows us to use the same questions year after year, but it also might be important to jog a respondent's memory. And so our question to you is, should we add a line after the question citing what might be considered, similar to what was done in previous surveys? So that's our first question. I'm going to go through these, the other two questions, and then we're going to leave this slide up for you all to respond to. The second question that we have for you has to do with the section about contributions to the work plan. And this is on page 3 of Appendix A that you can refer to. And you may want to discuss at what level of detail should we design the questions for this section. So exactly what are respondents evaluating in this section, and what should be the level of detail that we include in the design? And then the third question has to do with the open-ended questions. And so the open-ended questions have been consolidated on pages 3 and 4. And the responses last year showed some duplication of answers. So after reviewing the open-ended question, is there a need to refine any of these questions? And I think there's 3 there for you to take a look at and to consider. And so you know, maybe taking a few minutes to read through those before we move on to a discussion for that open-ended questions section.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'll pause there and turn it back to Chair Payne for member questions and comments.
Perfect. Thank you, Ronnie. So let's open those up for questions. Can you cycle back to the previous slide so that we can see what we're talking about here? Any input from folks about any of the 3? Let's take the first one, the general expectations and the bullet there. Ronnie, do you have the previous year's descriptive sentence, just as an example, if we wanted to choose that?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I don't have that necessarily prepared.
No worries.
Staff might have, well, they didn't actually deal with the survey last year. So I think it was just to prompt about like giving some specificity and some detail about the actions that took place that year related to that particular item.
Well, it's kind of tough in that sense for it being a sort of a general expectations tranche of questions, because that basically covers everything. Members, ideas, thoughts?
It would be helpful to anchor it in what we had done in previous surveys.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking generally, like I'm looking at the competency areas, which I still think are great, but a lot has changed and a lot has evolved, as we know, in the past couple of years with what the system has grown into. And the competency areas kind of read almost like an individual contributor a little bit, because at the time it was a very small staff and the executive director was kind of expected to be the lead on a lot of these things. But now I'm guessing, given the size of the team and the complexity of the organization, it's developed into much more of a delegation and development of staff role. So I'm wondering, you know, depending on what we had done in previous surveys for the prompting around these questions, it might be a good opportunity to revisit that language to make sure that what we're asking members to evaluate has evolved with how the organization has grown in complexity and size.
Great points.
Chris, is
Thoughts
there
from
a
others?
specific question that you think is a good example of that evolution?
Leadership is an area where I think, and maybe staff relations is an area, an opportunity where we could start thinking about how to inject staff development and delegation of authority and role into the conversation. And maybe even operations, business and finance, because it sort of reads more like the ED is doing a lot of this stuff directly. And
I still like the number 9 and 10 and leadership. I think those read really well. And so perhaps to your point, like an expansion around management, whether that falls under the leadership category or another one,
yeah,
might be useful, particularly given the scale of the staff. It doesn't seem like it would fit in program management, though. You're talking about like overall.
No.
yeah, that's external. It could be operations, business and finance.
Yeah. Although, Ronnie, to your point earlier about sort of confusion and duplication, if we talk about staff in operations, are we then sowing
Yeah.
confusion in a staff relations set of questions?
I think it would really depend on how we phrase it.
Yeah.
For each of those sections. And I think
Mhm.
that the language that you all have provided related to delegation or some other phrase might actually help us to narrow that down so it's not a duplication of staff relations.
Okay. Well, and conceivably you could modify the staff relations question to be, or have a second question to be one in which you talk specifically about sort of delegation and enfranchisement of staff operations, that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense because the number 5 is more about onboarding and creating a team.
And sort of the global atmosphere, but that
and
doesn't
the
speak to this
atmosphere,
specifically, right? So Ronnie, let's think about that as sort of another question in the staff relations piece of the equation.
All right, great.
Thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave this behind though. The general expectations, I'm struggling with myself with what we would actually say in that space. And so absent any idea about what that would be, I think at least my feeling would be to answer the question no and then move on.
Okay.
Any objection, folks? Okay.
Agreed.
No, I don't object to that. I think that's reasonable.
Okay. And now let's move on to go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I'll just say that although it could be helpful to provide context, it could feel leading to others, right? So I think that we just have to have that middle ground where we're not leading, but we also are providing context. So maybe that's another thing to read through those questions for.
True. I appreciate that too. And part of that too, though, is somewhat of the narration that we give around distribution and expectations for board members to fill out the survey itself and to be sort of being very clear about that set of expectations and what we're looking for and that kind of thing.
Great.
And that we can sort of less formally say what we're looking for in that communication. And let's go on to contributions to the work plan. What level of detail? I actually want to throw out something in the interest of shortening and wonder if we, and I'm going to say it, and I know I'm actually of several minds when I say it. Do we need this section if we build out the other sections appropriately, or is it important to call out the work plan as the guiding document? Just saying.
Yeah, it seems to be captured somewhat by strategy and communications.
It does seem to, I agree, it does seem to be captured. I wonder, given the self-evaluation process and in the past, there has been an opportunity to map out in writing or visually the work plan accomplishments and so forth. Is it possible that we can essentially rely on the self-evaluation mapping to the work plan and simplify items 16 through 19?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ronnie, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think that obviously the work plan is really important because that sets the direction for the year. So it's really how the executive director is setting out really their daily, weekly, monthly work is against that work plan.
Yeah.
So although the questions are general under the survey topics, it could be a missed opportunity to really identify either a strength or an opportunity for growth because it is measured against the established work plan.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And as I said, I'm of several minds of this. As the ostensibly the guiding document for all of our work and consideration, the work plan is pretty important. I'm wondering if we could sort of organize the work plan questions into the other segments with a specific reference to work plan. And so, for instance, if we're talking about board relations, do you communicate on the work plan? Do you engage in the work plan appropriately? Leadership, do you sort of use the work plan as your guiding document to sort of to run the organization, that sort of thing, and then have sort of the work plan call out in all the sort of the fundamental segments of what the ED is expected to do. Does that make sense, or am I confusing the issue?
No, I think that makes sense. Weaving it in as opposed to being discrete, because those domains are supposed to highlight accomplishments in the work plan that are now manifesting themselves in those various competencies. So we either do something like that, Gavin, or maybe this helps us answer that first question. Maybe part of what we're prompting in terms of general expectations is, to what degree does this help to contribute to the accomplishment of the work plan, or something to that effect, right? But I think there is, what I'm starting to hear from the group is that there is a need to have the work plan piece in existence in the survey, but perhaps not as its own discrete set of questions, woven either within various competency areas or within questions or something to that effect might be the best path.
Right. And to your point, Robert, do you go to the second question that what are we evaluating in the work plan questions? And that is, what are other domains of leadership? How do others feel about that? Chris, Meredith?
I like that idea. And then it also highlights that, something like engagement really cuts across multiple of those competency areas.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think having it cut across makes sense.
Okay.
My
recollection for you
recollection,
to go ahead, Robert.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to further emphasize this point. My recollection of the survey distribution process last year was that it included or attached the work plan or referenced the work plan, so that members are supposed to be looking at the work plan as they're responding to these various prompts. So maybe that's yet another avenue by which we can address that point.
I think that's very good practice anyway. Thank you for that, Robert.
Yeah, and I think that I'll just caution that I'll work closely with you, Chair Payne, just to make sure that we're not adding too much. right?
Yeah,
That we're
yeah.
getting that, yeah, we're getting the feel for it, right? I think somebody just said, like, what are the areas that are most connected to that work plan and where is a natural fit, as opposed to trying to put 4 items in each thing or whatever, right? Like, we don't want to
Agree.
go overboard.
Absolutely agree.
Okay, great.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Like, for instance, we may not need to, in the staff section, talk about the work plan per se.
Yeah, exactly.
good.
Let's take a
Okay.
look at that and see.
Yeah, okay. And so then what I'm hearing from you, Ronnie, is that you have enough to go on for the next steps on the work plan issue.
Yeah, I think so. I think I do for sure.
Great. Okay. So then let's turn to the last item, which is the open-ended questions. You'll see that it's 2021 and 22. They're all similar but different. I'm looking obviously for guidance about what people feel about them. Strike one, combine. What's the thought?
I mean, I think it's generally okay. To the degree that it might be duplicative, it's probably 20, which is the one where it says talk about the executive director's most significant achievements over the past year. Because especially especially we had retained the work plan set of questions, because you're not going to highlight something in an evaluation unless unless it was something that that you consider to have been a significant achievement. Now, having said that, it might depend on how much prompting or requiring we infuse within each question in terms of feedback, direct feedback, qualitative feedback on each area from the respondent, right? If you're requiring them to put something in there, in terms of an open-ended response, then yeah, we're probably going to need that question. But if you don't, then there might be some room.
My recollection from last year was that these open-ended questions were just that, open-ended questions, and folks could volunteer or not to fill them in. There are some places, and I think we'll get to those later on in the agenda, that we will require and will want more detail. But I think these ones were truly open, and from that standpoint, I'm comfortable if we strike sort of one or more of them. Especially since there's the other item for us to discuss is the coming up during the rating scale question.
I like question 20 because in theory, it kind of requires the respondent to prioritize across the achievements mentioned throughout the survey, and could serve as useful feedback to the ED going forward about, oh, I didn't even realize how important this was, even though, they made progress on it and worked on it. It's like, it helps prioritize things going forward to hear what the board members really value the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, especially since there are so many different categories. This allows for just like stepping back and really providing that direct feedback on, and I would imagine there would be some variety on the top couple of accomplishments from one respondent versus another. I do wonder if we're looking to, for user experience and to shorten 21, what do you consider to be the executive director's most effective leadership qualities and behaviors? I wonder if the leadership section might already cover that, or maybe it could be adjusted in wording so that we could save one question.
Yeah, I would agree with 21 potentially being expendable. It doesn't seem as actionable to me as the other two are.
Yeah.
And I agree, it could be subsumed in the leadership section.
Okay, Robert, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, perfectly fine. I mean, to the degree that you are accomplishing something, then it more than likely the respondent is going to explain what's leading or contributing to that accomplishment, in which case it would cover 21.
Yeah, okay, perfect. All right. It sounds to me like we have consensus on that. Thank you. So that's the set of those questions that you've had for us, Ronnie. Shall we move on to the next piece?
Yeah, if everybody has felt like they've shared with us what they need to about any of these items.
Yeah.
I would just say that I would just add that if we do get rid of 21, it is kind of related to 22. And so maybe just an adjustment in the wording on not just leadership qualities and behaviors to strengthen, but just, other activities or future accomplishments, something that makes more sense without 21.
That is a great suggestion. Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, agreed. Very good idea.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, where are we? So we've done that piece of the equation. So the rating scale is our next piece of work on this. And Ronnie, can you take that away, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what slide number are we on? I just want to make sure I'm in the right place.
We are on 18 now.
18. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Great. Okay. So thank you, Chair Payne. We'll take a look now at the rating scale, as you said, from the 2022-2023 survey that seemed to work well for members. And then we have some others for you to take a look at. But one of the things I want to point out in this rating scale is that you'll notice it goes from outstanding to needs improvement. So most members would choose anywhere within those 4 rating areas, but then there is also an option for do not know or did not observe. And so that might be for new board members or any board members that maybe didn't sort of see anything or might not have had experience in any of those areas. So that's what that 5th item is.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go to the next slide, please. The next slide provides some options for you all to think about for a rating scale if there's a desire to change the rating scale at all. And so in this case, number 1 is the rating scale that was from the 22-23 survey. And then you'll see that there is a little shift in language for number 2, but it still has the 5 categories, including not enough information or did not observe. And then the other options for 3 and 4 are slightly less. There's only 3 options for those that members could choose from. That is just a different way of looking at the rating scale that you might use. So I think that for staff and from LRI, we're actually recommending that you choose one of the first 2. And I can talk a little bit about why that might be, but that's what our recommendation is for you. But I'll turn it over to you, Chair Payne, for members' questions and comments. And then if you have any questions for me about our recommendation, I can jump into that.
Thanks, I will. I mean, sort of observing, I think I'm in the same place. It's either 1 or 2. And I'm going to ask this of you, Ronnie. It strikes me that number 2, I'm seeing the same sorts of language in lots of different places in recent years as well. Is your sense that the language in number 2, the sort of the industry standard language?
Well, I think this goes back to that one of those best practices that we talked about previously, that a word like outstanding may have emotions attached to it, or very good or satisfactory might have emotions attached to it, as opposed to something like significantly exceeds expectations. It's really talking about that work plan, talking about what the expectations are for the performance, in this case of the executive director. And then where that executive director falls on that scale about meeting or exceeding those expectations.
Yeah. Others, thoughts?
Chair Ping, I would concur that it should be between 1 and 2 for the reason that I think we do want to give an opportunity for members to indicate that they don't have enough information. Because yes, to the point that was made earlier, we have seen quite a bit of turnover within our membership ranks, including you know, I mean, ones as pretty, some that are really recent, and we don't want that to influence some of the survey responses if they truly didn't have an opportunity to observe an activity. In addition, there are, based on the level of engagement of a board member, some are going to have greater insights into specific aspects of the executive director's work than others. Like, you know, operations, things that are much more internal in nature. There are some board members, because they're a data provider or because they're participating in a specific committee, that might have much more insight into that, whereas another board member may not. And so we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to engage with the survey in ways that are authentic to their experiences as a board member.
So is in the staff report attachment A, the 3-2-1 rating scale, is that what's proposed, or is that what we had done before?
I think what we had done before is what you see on the slide as number 1.
Okay.
Is that correct, Ronnie? Yeah.
So 23-24 means what we did before.
Yes.
Okay, and 3-2-1 is what we're thinking about going forward. That's in the staff report.
Actually, no, I'd refer to the slide instead.
Okay.
Because I think that, at least from my standpoint, having a scale of 4 is much better than having a scale of 3. It's a lot more sort of nuance that people can articulate their feelings around.
Okay.
The only, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Well, just in terms of what's on the slide, I also like a hybrid of 1 and 2. I like improvement needed says a lot more to me than does not meet expectations. It's sort of, you know, like a call to action a little bit more than just saying does not meet. But
I was
otherwise,
thinking the exact same thing. Yep.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think I like 2 a little better than 1, with the exception of improvement needed.
Perhaps a hybrid of the 4th box, meaning improvement needed to meet expectations.
And is there any best practice on the do not know, did not observe versus not enough information to evaluate?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a best practice. That I think that one of the things these options are getting at is that there has been research done that oftentimes if you give individuals 3 choices or 5 choices, they will almost always go with the middle choice, right? So I think that having 4 is much better. I don't know if there's a best practice. I could do a little bit of research about do not know, did not observe versus not enough information to evaluate. You know, it feels to me that it could be interpreted differently by others. I don't know if you, Member Lee, have a preference, or if you're looking at it and thinking like it would be easier for you to answer one or the other.
Well, if there's a way to display the 4 options, right? Whether we're talking outstanding to improvement needed or significantly exceeds expectations to improvement needed, separate, like with just a space, and then there's a not enough information, so that the clarity of like that is a totally different option than a scale, right?
Got it.
That's a good point. The only other thing I would contribute to this is did not observe. That phrase might be misinterpreted as, well, I did not observe that of the executive director, and therefore I'm going to select that, even though they had seen enough of it to be able to, presumably to be able to evaluate. I mean, that's taking it, that might be an outlier observation, but if we're trying to poke holes at it to get to the best outcome, that might be a consideration for us that someone could misinterpret that.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be a direct observation. There could be other evidence of meeting that expectation beyond a direct observation through a report that was submitted or feedback that was given or something like that, right? So it could be that not enough information to evaluate is a better space to stay in.
Yeah, in that regard, I concur with you, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so Ronnie, is that sufficient for you to act upon?
Can I just summarize back just a little bit that it sounds like number 2 overall, number 2, that the way that number 2 is phrased seems to be the one that's resonating with members most. But thinking about in that 4th area, improvement needed to meet expectations might be a better phrasing that the committee is thinking about. And then for the last one of not enough information to evaluate seems to be a better way of phrasing that particular thing for new members or other members who have just joined. I think that somebody made a comment about maybe there's a way that we can structure that so that not enough information sits outside. I'll have to look at that on the survey platform itself and see if there's any opportunity to do that. Sometimes there's not as much flexibility as we would want in some of those platforms, but I'll take a look and see what I can do.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you very much. I think we have it on that. One other thing that I wanted to narrate for folks on the rating scale, I'm referencing with Robert. We did a postmortem after last year's process, and one of the things that came out of that postmortem was, if you recall, if the rating was improvement needed, then we required the respondent to fill in some rationale and give more detail around what that was. What occurred in that postmortem was a recognition that we really weren't giving people an opportunity to articulate, and there was no box for further response for any of the other ratings. And so there was some frustration around people not being able to articulate themselves the reasons that they made an outstanding or an significantly exceeds expectations rating. What came out of that conversation was a desire for the next instrument to have a box open, still voluntary, however, for if the rating is outstanding or significantly meets expectations, but it be optional, and to continue to require the improvement needed category to some articulation of expectations or articulation of why that rating was given. Does that make sense to folks? Does that make logistical sense? Ronnie, can you do that in the survey instrument?
Yeah, I think it would just be a matter of what you want to require versus not require. So given an opportunity could mean that if a rating of, if we adopt number 2, that if a rating of significantly exceeds expectations, there's an opportunity to provide additional comments, versus what happened last year, which is that if the choice was does not meet expectations or needs improvement, that it was required that a member give a response. So I think that we can structure the survey in a way that would allow an opportunity on one end and require a response on the other end, if that's something that sounds
perfect.
good.
Are folks comfortable with that?
That seems good to me. I would encourage an optional text box as well if someone checks not enough information to evaluate. There might be some insights if we have a comment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Available there.
Yeah, that we might be able to get something from that. I'd be okay with that. That's great.
So what it sounds like, Member Lee, is, well, the whole group, I should say. Would it be that there's an optional text box for all options except for does not meet expectations, which is required? Is that what we're driving at?
I would support that, except Ronnie mentioned it's supposed to be like improvement needed in order to meet expectations or.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's right. That's right. You're right. Yes, correct. Thanks for that correction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great question. Do you want there to be opportunities to provide written comments across all four, depending on what all four of the ratings, depending on what members reply? Because I just want to call us back to the other conversation about the open-ended questions and trying to narrow those down and make those less. So there's just a little tension between that discussion and then this of offering all of the opportunities. So it's up to the members. You all can decide, but I think that thinking about you know, time and attention and what kinds of responses that we will get.
Okay. Thoughts? The piece that I described was the piece that came out of our postmortem last year, but I'm comfortable with there being an optional box anywhere. And one of the certainly, I certainly don't think that we should have it be a requirement, because one of the things that I would worry about is people opting to give a different rating if they have to fill something out, right?
So if it's optional, it's fine. That feels comfortable to you all. If those first
Yeah,
optional.
I'd feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would feel comfortable as well. I understand Ronnie's point, but I think so long as it's not compulsory, we're okay. For sure, does not. Okay. Improvement needed to meet expectations. That one has to have something, because we are, you know, I mean, our experience.
We have to know. That's exactly.
Yeah, we I mean, yeah, and there has to be some accountability on the part of the governing board member to provide specific feedback if you're going to give that kind of a performance rating.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
Okay.
agree.
All right.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think on the instrument and the scale, we've completed our work. And Ronnie, I just want to do a gut check to see that you have enough information to go on. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Then if we could please, let's just now turn Ronnie to the logistics and the administration stuff that you have for us.
yes. So
Starting with slide 23.
Yeah, slide 23. Great. Thank you. So just a few comments about this, that LRI, Leading Resources Inc. will administer the survey through SurveyMonkey. And so we'll be creating that on an online platform and administering it. And LRI staff will be the only ones who have access to the platform, and will also be responsible for analyzing the survey data, the raw data that then we compile in a summary and provide to the governing board chair. So next slide, if you would, please. So the goal is to really achieve 100% response rate. And so the survey will be shared with all governing board members, and it's critical that all members of the board complete the survey. So 100% is really what we're going for, A+. And so a couple of things that we'll do in order to ensure that the administration does reach that 100% response rate. We'll identify any information that may be included in the survey to determine who has and has not completed the survey, right? So, but that will only be LRI who has access to that information. Members who have not completed the survey by a predetermined date will be sent reminders from LRI. And then additionally, LRI staff, myself, will all be available to help any member log in or get the information that they need in order to access the survey. And then members who have not completed it by also a predetermined date will then be identified as LRI, and the names will be shared with the chair and the chair-elect, so that the chair and the chair-elect can support us and 100% completion rate that we want to get to. So we'll have additional steps that will be taken to protect identities of respondents in connection to their responses. So that's not shared with the boards or the members, so or the staff. And so what that means is that any data that we report back to the chair will be anonymized. There won't be anybody's identification on any of the ratings.
Perfect.
Great. Next slide. So before we begin member deliberation, I wanted to highlight the proposed motion in the agenda item. The office recommends that the committee move to approve the survey as specified in the report. And I'll now pass it over to Chair Payne.
Great. Thanks so much. If we can go back to the motion piece, I think we've made some suggestions. What I would ask for from the members is a motion to approve the survey as specified in the report and discussed by the members, or as agreed by the members. Does that work?
It works for me, and I would be happy to move that motion.
Okay, great. So moved by Robert. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. I have a motion and a second. Now from that, let me do a gut check for Julia about whether or not I've articulated the motion appropriately for our consideration.
I think so.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So before we vote, let's do our customary pause for public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note the comments should be limited to item number 3, the survey instrument process. Before we open it up to folks from the public on Zoom, and I'll pass it off to Stephanie for that, I ask that members in our remote locations confirm that there is no public comment at your location. We'll start with Member Ferguelli. Is there anyone there to make public comment at your location?
There is not.
Okay. Member Lee?
There is not.
Member Tagorda?
There is not.
And for myself, looking around, there is no one here for public comment on this. And so Stephanie Gutierrez-Valdez, take it over and let's go open to the Zoom. Let's open up the Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Payne. I'd like to confirm that there is no one here at the C2C office wishing to comment. So I will go ahead and open it up to Zoom. For members of the public that would like to make a comment, I ask that you please raise your hand using the button at the bottom of the screen. As Chair Payne mentioned, if we have more than 10 folks that would like to comment, speaking time will be limited to 1 minute. Therefore, I ask all interested to raise their hand at this time to determine individual speaking time. At this time, I see no raised hands. I will go ahead and give it a few seconds, I should say. Okay, I will go ahead and close public comment as I see no raised hands. Thank you.
Perfect. Public comment being opened and closed. We have a motion and a second. Stephanie, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Payne?
Aye.
Member Ferguelli?
Aye.
Member Lee?
Aye.
Member Moldahl? And Member Tagorda?
Aye.
For the clarity of the record, we have 4 ayes.
The motion passes unanimously. Perfect. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to agenda item 4, review of the next steps in the executive director process. Again, Ronnie, this is the part of the review for you to review for us. What is next in line?
Yes, thank you so much. Is there a next slide or is this the slide? Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. So you'll see that on this slide, it's a repeat of the slide before, that we are now moving towards the November 15th board meeting presentation. And so we will start to draft the survey, taking into consideration all of the comments and all of the suggestions that this committee has presented. And then you can see through November and December, the survey period opens, culminating on December 20th when the survey summary is shared with the chair, who then prepares that evaluation. Our next meeting together in this committee will be January 16th. And I believe that will be a closed session to take a
Right.
look at the performance evaluation that was prepared by the chair. And then obviously culminating on February 28th with the presentation at the board meeting.
Perfect. Any member questions or concerns? Marvelous. Okay, that completes item 4. Let's move on to item 5, if we could please. General public comment. This agenda item is for general public comment. Before we open it up to folks from the public on Zoom, and I pass it off to Stephanie, may I ask members in our remote locations to confirm that there is no public comment person, a general public comment person in your location? Member for Joelle.
There are none here.
Member Lee.
None here.
Member Tagorda.
None here.
And I can confirm that there is no one here either at my location. So Stephanie, for general public comment, can you please open it up to the Zoom?
Yes, I'd like to confirm that there is no one at the C2C office wishing to comment. Opening it up to Zoom, I'd like to say for members of the public that would like to make a comment, if you could please raise your hand using the button at the bottom of the screen. As Chair Payne mentioned, if we have more than 10 folks that would like to comment, speaking time will be limited to 1 minute. Therefore, I ask all interested to raise their hands at this time to determine individual speaking time. I currently see no raised hands on Zoom. I would go ahead and give it a couple of seconds. So if you're interested, please go ahead and raise your hand at this time. Seeing no raised hands, I will close public comment at this time.
Thank you. Seeing no general public comment, now we open it up to our agenda item number 6, future agenda items. During this agenda item, we'll open it up for members and the public for discussing future agenda items that are appropriate to the purview of this committee. Before we do that, I want to start with members to see if there are any suggestions for future agenda items. Scanning. Seeing none. Before we open it up to members of the public for future agenda items, I want to ask that members in our remote locations confirm that there is no public comment at your location. Member for Joelle.
There are none here.
Member Lee.
There are none here.
Member Tagorda.
None here.
Perfect. And I'm confirming that I have no one here. Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I'd like to confirm that there is no one at the C2C office wishing to comment, so opening it up to Zoom. For members of the public that would like to make a comment, I'd ask that you please raise your hand at this time using the button at the bottom of the screen. As Chair Payne mentioned, if we have more than 10 folks that would like to comment, speaking time will be limited to 1 minute. Therefore, I ask all interested to raise their hands at this time to determine individual speaking time. I see no raised hands at this time. I'm going to go ahead and give it a few seconds. Okay, seeing no raised hands, I will close public comment at this time.
Perfect. Thank you. Next item of business is for me to call it quits for us. I want to thank Member for Joelle, Member Tagorda, Member Lee, and especially Ronnie and the team for your participation today. I think it was a fulsome conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next steps. And I want to thank you all for your participation. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thank you.